Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Michael Weist and a few others centered around the TanaCon tragedy of an event back in 2018. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, I will tell you what that is right after the intro itself. Let's go. So back in 2018, influencer Tana Mojo was upset because VidCon, which is a conference for video. It's a conference for YouTubers, future YouTubers, and the fans thereof to be able to go and do a meet and greet. It's like Comic-Con, but for video. Ergo, the name VidCon. They did not invite Tana to be a featured influencer there. So she decided to throw a fit and create TanaCon. Now, TanaCon in concept was a fantastic idea. It's a much more affordable way for people to be able to go and meet some top tier creators. Well, needless to say, that did not go well. They booked a hotel that had a capacity for 3,000 people at its maximum, and they had roughly, I think, 20,000 people or so showed up, because they advertised things like free tickets, and then some people just showed up, and then they had paid tickets as well, and there was no effort done to prepare for such numbers, and it fell apart miserably. Well, the founder and CEO of a company that helped head up the TanaCon event is named Michael Weist. He's 24 years old, and he thinks that he's some of the best stuff to hit the internet, or frankly, to step foot on this planet. So that's always exciting. But needless to say, since the event didn't go well, he received a lot of backlash for it. I mean a lot. We're going to go ahead and analyze his nonverbal behaviors because he decided he wanted to step onto the show Dr. Phil to be able to talk to Dr. Phil because he said Dr. Phil is one of the only people who could understand him. So his idea was to be able to go on to Dr. Phil and to talk about his side of things, to hopefully apologize. I think that's what people were anticipating. I'm pretty sure that's not what he was anticipating. Regardless, he goes on Dr. Phil and I think it's just better that you see this. Let's go ahead and dive into the analysis.
Why were you so high profile in this, that people are 2 years later bad-mouthing you?
I will also say this because I forgot to mention it. I had to really heavily edit this footage that I'm reacting to. It has that cheesy VHS overlay on top of it. It has a zoom in, a flippy around for the orientation of everything, its contrast is up, its saturation is down, and its pitch is changed because let me tell you about the nightmare that is the Dr. Phil's studio. They're very money grabby, so I go to great lengths to try to avoid that. So you'll notice this. I have areas where I've dropped out and it's just the audio that's usually in B-roll or in footage that's just Dr. Phil, and everything else has this other editing on it so that we can get this out to you. Otherwise, they'll do what they did with my last video and block it on half the countries in the world. So that's why you see all of this. If you notice it, that's the reason why. Let's go ahead and watch.
How do people even know who you are?
It's a combination of things. I had already had an established presence online at that point anyways. I had over 300,000 followers on Vine when Vine existed. So I was already like...
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about his baseline because I was able to establish a fair bit of baseline. He actually has a pretty common one. It's not very active. It's not very subdued. It's quite literally in the middle ground, which is just something that's good to be able to establish from a beginning point. If you don't have your beginning point, then you're going to have difficulty establishing this up here. So his baseline is more or less just what you would consider a vanilla baseline. Nothing really too spectacular about it. So let's keep watching.
Known and recognized
as an individual.
As an individual,
okay.
Yes. And then once everything kind of escalated and such, I was thrown into the media even more just because everyone had to turn to some sort of answer, and obviously that was me.
This was Tana.
Yes, that would be you. You headed up the event. Don't worry, Tana got her fair share of backlash for that as well. But yes, the person who created the event, or at least helped create the event, would probably receive some backlash. I don't know if he's surprised by that. he shouldn't be. Let's watch.
TanaCon.
Right.
So this was Tana Mojo and a bunch of other influencers and all. And you're in the background
Right.
on this. You're not one of the creators. You're not one of the influencers. You're not one of the talent that's out there. How do they even know who to blame, to find you to blame?
Well, I mean, I had to go out and, like, when I made an announcement when it was canceled, I had to, all these news cameras were everywhere, just pointed on me, the hotels, everyone's coming at me.
But I thought...
So you'll get the sense from Michael that he appreciates attention, that he does kind of bask in it. The details about all of the news cameras pointed on him and everybody looking at him while it is answering Dr. Phil's question. It's also not necessary information, but he does have this I want to seem grand feeling about him. Many people have picked it up. That's some verbal patterning of it already, and it's interesting. There's no visual tells for this deceit that he's already slipped in so far, but he has already lied once in saying that he had to make an announcement to all of these people. He didn't. He didn't make an announcement. He got his assistant to make an announcement, and she more or less had to go and get crucified by all these very disappointed and scammed fans. So already we have a lie in here, but we might as well continue watching, right?
Sydney went out and told everybody it was canceled.
She did. So Sydney went out
It wasn't you, it was Sydney.
the first time. And then at the end, when I had to make, like, the official cancellation, she went out to try to de-escalate.
Okay, so what we're noticing here is a lot of stammering, stuttering. This can be found in deceit, but it is found in areas where you have to do psychological processing very intensely. It's hard to be able to let your words flow if you're not prepared for a question. So obviously Dr. Phil is like, but your assistant went out and did that. So what's your response to that? And he's like, oh man, you weren't supposed to do your research. You were supposed to take my word for this because I wanted to lie to you. So yes, the truth is that his assistant had to go out. She had to bear the brunt of the wrath of the people that he had scammed, and then he went out a little bit later. So he technically didn't fully lie, but he did lie. And Dr. Phil has already called him out on that. So kudos to Dr. Phil on that. Let's keep watching this. Let's watch it.
Escalate the situation.
Okay.
And then when I had to go out at the end and make the final calls, that was when all the cameras were there. I think that was a clip in your video.
Okay, and then clear this up for me, because I saw a video online by Tana Mojo and announced that she was going to do this, where she said, I'm going to do this on the same day as VidCon, a free meet and greet.
Right.
But then I heard everybody...
So there's a smile of contempt and a lip compression. So there's some sort of negative emotion, commonly found around anger or something along those lines, but then he also has a smile of contempt. So there's something behind that we're not privy to yet. For those of you who don't know, contempt is an indicator of moral or intellectual superiority to the people or person near you. So he has that smile of contempt, so we can rest assured that he has some sort of information that we are not privy to yet. Also, he has a lip compression, so there's a negative emotion centered around it. We're not sure what it is, but there is that tell already. So whatever we're about to hear here is not going to be super great. Let's find out what that is.
Chanting, refund, refund, refund. How do you refund free?
Well, so not every ticket was free. There was a free ticket, and we gave away several hundred free tickets, but there was also an elevated, I believe it...
Interesting. He's looking down when he says we gave away several hundred free tickets, and then he'll look up after that. That's an interesting part where he's looked away. This could be due to nerves, could be due to natural flow of conversation. Not many people just hold a person's gaze the entire conversation, but it could be that way. But it is interesting that pops up here when he's saying several hundred free tickets. So that's where that earlier smile of contempt, negative emotion, and then all of this display around the tickets. Now we know that he was not advertising it accurately in that there were actual tickets that you had to buy as well. There were free tickets, but there were purchasable tickets as well.
Was a VIP ticket that was like $65 or so. So it was a combination of free tickets, and then her saying that added to the theory that there was even more free tickets available, which, obviously escalated when people showed up out of nowhere. But there was a paid ticket as well.
Okay. So there were free tickets.
There were, yes, sir.
Now, obviously, I didn't go to TanaCon. I don't actually know anybody who directly went to TanaCon, but just thinking about it, I could see that friends would tell friends, hey, I got a ticket to TanaCon for free. Let's go together. They are free tickets, so they probably can't track them anyway. So I am sure that there were at least a few people who did show up without tickets. There could even be 1,000 people plus, but let's keep watching.
Joining us from her home in Orange County, California is Amanda. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad you're here because you were there. Why did you feel it was important?
Because you were there. She does a tight-lipped smile with an eyebrow raise. So the eyebrow raise is addressing what he said. It's an amplifier. People will use that in their words as well. Whenever you want to amplify something you're saying, you'll raise your eyebrows, as I just did there, even not thinking about it. But then the tight-lipped smile is more revealing. Tight-lipped smiles are never in regards to something that you just had a blast at. It's usually a negative connotation to that. So if you see somebody with a tight-lipped smile, they either are not having a good time, they're speaking of something that they didn't have a good time in, or they are afraid that they're not going to have a good time. It's usually in that area. Regardless, it was not a good time, therefore the tight-lipped smile. Let's keep watching.
To participate today and weigh in on what took place.
Well, I felt it was important because even at the event itself, I felt like the safety of attendees wasn't even thought of. Not only just security-wise, refreshments-wise, there was no food or water available aside from the hotel Starbucks. This was an event.
Think about this for a tiny second. You show up to an event, a fairly large event, as it's been advertised by a fairly large influencer, and you show up and there's probably several thousand people. Even if you show up very early, there's probably several thousand people there, and you show up and the only refreshments in sight are from the Starbucks in a hotel, which are usually great and small. They're very small, so obviously that's not going to be a viable option. So refreshments are already out of the picture. This isn't a good show all the way around, but many of you know that. Let's get back to the body language.
That was mostly attended by children and young teenagers. Myself included, I was 20 at the time. I went alone.
So what we can see on her face is a lot of polite smiling and those eyebrow raises for amplification. So eyebrow raises sprinkled throughout to be able to help bring home her point, and then a fake smile to be able to be polite on screen. I'm sure she was probably coached to be like, hey, be as pleasant or polite as you can, but, be upfront, or however they say their things in there. They are coached, by the way. If you've ever watched any sort of TV, anything that's been on TV, it's been coached. So she no doubt has received coaching on this, ergo the polite smile, but it's quite obvious in that it doesn't ever reach her eyes that it's fake. So there's an emotion kind of welling about underneath that. We happen to be privy to the fact that she's upset, but if we didn't, we would know that there was something going on.
I ended up becoming a makeshift mom for half of the kids there because no one knew what was going on, and it was so stuffed.
Right. So you were kind of momming out there, helping some of these kids, helping a mother find her. I mean, you were doing kind of what there should have been controls to take care of, particularly when you have a magnet for young people, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
another very large lip compression in there, usually related to negative emotions. She's all synchronized here so far. There has been no reason for me to doubt anything that she's saying. Everything that she has been saying has been fully synchronized with the nonverbal communication she's displayed. So that leads me to believe that she's authentic. We'll get around to Michael here in a moment.
So
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
First off, I would like to say
Postural shifts. Whenever you see somebody doing this, there's a few reasons for it. So it could be that they've been sitting quite still in a chair for a while and they're uncomfortable and they would like to move. That is a very possible reason for it. And he has been sitting, from what we've seen of the little tiny flashes of the wider screens, in the same position for a while. But he didn't shift anywhere until he started to talk. And that postural shifts is a change of roles, so to speak. He's now trying to take charge, and that's showing up in his big postural shift that he's doing there. He's changing roles in his mind from the person who's listening and maybe being berated to where he wants to take control and he wants to be in the power position here. Ergo, the postural shift. Let's watch to see what else happens with this.
I'm sorry that you experienced that.
Horrible, just unendingly horrible. apology. I'm sorry that you experienced that. Not, I'm sorry that I did a terrible job. I could have done better. It's, I'm sorry that your experience wasn't what you wanted it to be. That's the extended version of what he just did. That's not an apology. That's an excuse. I believe Dr. Phil calls him out for this in a bit. But if you have somebody that apologizes to you like that, hey, I'm sorry that you aren't happy, or that you did this, or that you're feeling this, and they're not apologizing for themselves, don't buy it. It's not an apology. It's an excuse. If you are a person who apologizes like that, try to reconsider, because you are not actually apologizing for what you've done wrong. You're apologizing for the other person's feelings or how they perceived what happened. That's not your job. Your job is to apologize for you. So he offers a fake apology. I doubt she's going to buy it.
I would also like to address, there's been a common misconception that there wasn't food or water when we actually had over 10 food trucks in the back of the parking lot open to anyone. As far as I know...
Michael.
Go ahead.
Hi, 1 second. So once you got inside, you couldn't leave because they wouldn't let you back inside. So how am I waiting in line? Security that you hired, your event staff, because what's being ignored is how long the wait times is. I got in line before around 7 a.m. I didn't got in at noon. Once you were inside, they made it.
So you can see that he has a slight look of disgust on his face. This could be his resting face for sure, but he is receiving heat from her, and that is likely to play out on his face. Also in other areas, he has a more pleasant resting face. So this is quite literally an expression of scorn, which is a mixture of anger and disgust on his face. Also mixed with a little bit of defiance, as you can see that he has his chin elevated just lightly, showing his neck. That's a very common defiance gesture. Regardless, he's not going to hear what she is about to say. That's what you can see. When you see this sort of expression, emotional display from a person who is being berated, they are not receiving what they are being told or spoken to about. So whatever happens from this point on, either one, he's going to deny it, or he's going to offer some sort of small excuse for it. Regardless, he doesn't want to take responsibility for it, as shown by his body language.
Clear, if you want to leave, you have to go all the way back to the end of the line. So if I'm hungry and I have to go and wait to the food trucks, I'm either leaving my line or I'm leaving the event. We can talk about some of the lies you mentioned earlier when I was watching your intro. We can talk about that.
Okay.
Well, for example, something that's being admitted is that you reached out to Tana because she put out her video. The video went up a month before VidCon and TanaCon. So this whole event was planned in a month. That's not being discussed.
A month?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of the things you're talking about.
Go look it up. It's true. Also with his expression of confusion, doesn't reach his eyes. It's a forced emotion, so he's not confused by this statement that she has just given. He's trying to feign confusion. And that's because it's fake. It's fake confusion. She told the truth. That's the long and short of it.
So there was a 5-hour wait to get inside, and you were one of the first ones there?
I was one of the 1,000 people about that got inside.
Okay, and so you were there. When you got there at 7 a.m., were there a lot of people there?
In line, yes.
Okay.
And I'll say this.
And you got in, but you got in.
Yes, I got in.
But once you got in after waiting 5 hours, there were no concessions inside to...
No, there was the Starbucks and there was the hotel gift shop, I believe, which I didn't even try to fight the crowds in there because they were already packed.
There was a full service restaurant in there as well that we paid.
That was not open to attendees. There was a...
The outrage from Michael. It's that defensive, actually even posturing. His tone, you can hear it, and the words that he's using, you could obviously hear those. But if you watch his posturing as well, he's tucking his neck in and he's leaning back and he's bracing himself on the arms of the chair as he's leaning back. These are extremely defensive gestures. Once again, she has criticisms for what he did, and he is in no way open to or interested in receiving said criticisms or facing them. That's been very, very clearly indicated by his body language.
Sign that said influencers featured creators only, which was for the actual influencers of the event on the lineup.
Ultimately, there was a lot of things that went wrong, which is why I made the decision to cancel it. But There's also a lot of misinformation out there. Now, due to VidCon being in the area, we had...
So while he's saying there's also a lot of misinformation out there, he has some micro movements of his head no, but they are big enough that you could intentionally be doing like the no sort of thing. So that is a possibility of a desynchronized point between what he's saying and his nonverbal communication, where he's saying there's a lot of misinformation out there, but he's shaking his head no, as if there might not actually be that much misinformation out there. It could actually just be that terrible of an event, but that's not enough scientifically to go off of. It's something that we've made note of, but nothing that we can hang weight on.
One choice for security, and we bought every employee that they had. I maxed out their entire team. Like, I bought every single employee that security company had.
When did you do that?
When we planned the event months before. We had our director of the event.
Okay. I believe him on the point of the security. I believe that he did find whatever security was left over and then bought out everybody that they had. And it was likely a very small team. I believe that. That part is believable. She asked, when did you do that? And he's like, whenever we planned it months before. And he also loses a little bit of force behind his voice, behind his tone. That's an indicator of possible insecurity in what's being said. Basically, it means that you should ask questions in that area. And then also he has a really sharp breath in right after he mentions the couple months before, and that's a nervous sound. That kind of sound, that is a sound of agitation, of nervousness. So something centered around that isn't true, which, like we said, we know that it's false because the simple math shows that it's false. But he's still trying to uphold that they had planned this for many, many, many months before the event itself. But his body language is kind of calling him out on that front, showing what the truth is rather than what the words he's saying are trying to communicate.
Ultimately, we went through walkthroughs with them, walkthrough with that. So everyone was supposed to be allowed back into the event. You weren't supposed to go back into line. Once you checked in, there was a separate entrance to the right that was pre-checked in. Also, side note,
you're saying on the back lot, the lot with, I remember the food trucks you're talking about because I saw them, because I mentioned, I don't know if they pulled up because of this or because they were hired to be there. They were across the street in a side lot outside of the hotel.
We didn't tell the food trucks what to park. We have partners.
She's not lying. You can tell more so because of the illustrators that she's using. She is using directionally based and positionally based gestures to where she's saying the conference is here and they're on a back lot over there, detached from everything else, and that's an indicator of authentic recollection or speaking authentically about something. Whenever a person can positionally and spatially remember things, that is a large indicator that it's probably true. Not all the time. None of this is all the time, obviously. Body language reading is 70 to 80% accurate on average, with that leeway on either side, so obviously there are exceptions. But in this area, I would still believe that she's being authentic. She also has no reason to lie.
And staff, like, at the end of the day, I have a huge team to run. But I'm not here to relive the past or talk to you about those kind of things. Again, I'm sorry that you had that experience. That's why I made the decision to, if I could speak, that's why I made the decision to.
This comes in a little bit later on. I believe he says he wants to heal from the past, but he doesn't want to talk about the past, which, if that's true, then he wants to talk about something future. And that would be true in that this seems to be a bit of a publicity stunt for him to be able to open up his next business avenue and get some traction online from that, and also elsewhere in the world, since this airs on television still. But that's not scientific. Let's watch.
Cancel the event for safety. At the end of the day, you think I wanted to cancel it? I knew when I made that call that I would lose everything I had built in my career. Ultimately, it was the only choice to do. And I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. I am, truly. Do you think that's worth me killing myself?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. Once again, hollow apology. And then he goes on and I am, truly. Now he's nodding an affirmation, which is good. These are also based in the context in which he's using them. Also amplifying gestures. Eyebrow raises and nods can be used to be able to amplify what is being said. So he's just trying to add weight to that, but his apology that he's given, I'm sorry that you experienced something or that you had to experience that or whatever his exact words were, are still hollow. It's not an apology. He's taking no responsibility for it. He's trying to play the victim of something that he himself orchestrated.
Self over.
Here's a graphic of the security protocols. Medical. If an attendee requires medical attention, please bring them to the medical team and document everything: names, contact information, age, what happened, etc. If they're not able to be transported to the medical team, please radio your supervisor to dispatch a medic. Questions. Do not answer anything if you don't know the definite answer. Radio a supervisor, contact the executive staff member, direct them to the customer.
So on his face right now, the general expression would be considered neutral, but then the tightening and narrowing of the mouth would be considered an aggressive or angry expression. He's not happy. That's very clear. Everybody could look at him and be like, oh, he's obviously pissed. That's why. That's what you're picking up on. That's just where he's at emotionally right now, which still isn't great for trying to take accountability or responsibility or apologize or anything that he probably should be doing. But even from his own words, he's not there to apologize or relive the past or take responsibility. He's there to heal from whatever. And then we also know he's there for marketing.
Service booth. Last thing you want is to give them bad information. Meet and greet flow.
Keep the flow moving. Don't let girls linger too long. Let them do their thing and move on. If they linger, be nice. Kindly tell them to move on and call the next girl.
Don't let girls put their bags down until it's their turn to meet and greet. Tell the girls to have their phones and cameras ready. So these were the security protocols. What was the date that you signed with the hotel?
The date I signed the contract?
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest. So much.
Stalling time. Obviously, that would be the question is, what's the date that you signed the contract with the hotel? Yes, definitely that. Not, did you sign your birth certificate with them? Yes, the contract with the hotel. So he's stalling on that front, which is not great. That's another indicator of possible deceit, which we know he's already lying due to the math, but he's still throwing up these smoke screens to be able to make sure that he's cleared as much as he can. Because he's not here for responsibility taking, he's here for marketing.
Just happened since then.
Because it was within a month of the event being planned.
I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look through the documents, which I'm sure I have a copy of somewhere. Everything that could have went wrong did. And I'm so sorry that happened. I really am.
He keeps saying that. I'm so sorry that happened. I really am. This was actually verbally the closest that he got to an actual apology, but still he's only apologizing for what happened. He's not apologizing for his role in it anyways, but he's also showing that he's not really sincere at that. He says, I'm so sorry that happened, and then he closes his eyes very firmly and prolonged. This would be an eye-blocking gesture, and he says, I really am, and he's got micro movements of the head no in there. That's a desynchronization point in his verbal to nonverbal channels, which means that it's possibly deceptive. So if we were to go into this clean slate, possible deceit. But we're not going to this with a clean slate. We already know he's lying, and we can see that he clearly shows that.
I wish I could have done things differently. Also, we didn't expect that many people to be there. Some of these issues that came up would have never happened. You know, like we would have, in an ideal world, I would have had the Anaheim Convention Center. Oh, wait, VidCon was there. If I proposed to move it to a different date, it needed to be the same time as VidCon. That was,
and what was the date of the event?
I want to say June, like 20th through the 23rd, something like that. It was right around
I believe it was the 22nd.
Yeah, I want to say that one of the days was the 22nd. But ultimately, for me, it felt.
Can we talk about the
longer.
tickets?
That seems to be genuine. From what I could see, everything that was flowing from his nonverbal channels was synchronized with his words, so there's not an indicator of deception. So that's good news, and it's true. If nobody had shown up to the event that was supposed to be the alternate, the better version of VidCon, if nobody showed up to that, then it would have gone off without a hitch because nobody was there. So that doesn't make so much sense. If you were marketing it as something that would be an alternate to VidCon, you have it on the same day as VidCon, and you have influencers like VidCon does, then maybe plan as if it were VidCon. I don't know. That makes sense to me at least, but it would be really hard to do that in 1 month.
Well, the security contract was signed on June 22nd.
Yes, we finalized security ultimately several different times. That's probably like the final draft version.
What do you want to say about the tickets? Then we have to...
That's probably like the final draft version. That's probably like something to possibly the final time. So who actually knows? It's a smoke screen. He's throwing up another smoke screen. Did they have multiple times to sign a security contract? Possibly. Who knows? We don't know what the actual protocol from that security company is, but he's still throwing up smoke screens. It's a common thing in deception for people to throw in these smoke screens and to undermine their own language by saying things like probably and like and could have been this way, would have been this way. These are all indicators of possible deception. Wow, what a shock.
to go to break.
Oh, well, Michael said that there was several hundred free tickets, and there just wasn't. There was 200.
That would classify as
Because
several
he
hundred.
himself...
No, that would classify as a couple hundred. He's trying to beef up some areas of his planning process, which he didn't have. You get the picture. Let's watch this.
Said in his documentary that he put out, that he produced, that he starred in, about the event, he shows the ticket portal, and on it, it shows free ticket, or the VIP section, 200, and then featured creator, he had that at about 5,000.
Right, 5,200. Now, I do think we added another 300 free tickets at some point after that, but regardless, I would classify 200 free tickets as several free tickets, or several hundred. That's more than 100. With that said, there are safety concerns. I couldn't just give everyone a free ticket. Like, that would
But when
be...
you have the advertised, when you're advertising the event as mostly free the
Who
entire
advertised
time,
that? Because I did not advertise a free event.
most of this was done over Twitter. That is what.
I don't
kept
see how,
saying, "Just
frankly,
come
that's
through."
not relevant to anything, but I thank you for your observation.
Calling him out again for something that he didn't plan for or take responsibility for, and he says that it's not relevant. He's very defensive. Again, we could see the pretty heavy chin-tucking gesture, and his tone is dropping, and it's becoming more soft. He has no authority in his voice in this area, and that's because he's fully on the defensive, which is the common thread throughout this entire interview, is that he's fully on the defensive and refuses to take responsibility for anything that he designed. It's baffling, really. Let's keep watching.
Well, that was pretty condescending.
I mean, I'm not here to relive the past about things that could have happened. I'm here to heal.
That is exactly what you're here for.
I'm not, though. I'm here to heal and help some little 13-year-old girl who's being cyberbullied, who's contemplating suicide.
He's using manipulation now, which I'm sure all of us are totally blindsided by. He seems to be such an upstanding, responsible young man anyways. So now he's using manipulation in two different areas. Earlier, he uses it in regards to himself, and now he's using it in regards to a unnamed young girl. And that's never acceptable. Never, ever, ever use that as a manipulation tactic. It's an extremely offensive thing to use as manipulation. He's using it here because he wants to have that shock value, because he's feeling like he's losing this battle, so he has to pull in some heavy hitters. That's not okay. Very little respect for him and a lot of issues with what he just said.
Something I've dealt with for 3 years, every waking moment, told that I'm a worthless human being over a mistake and that I should kill myself? Are you kidding me?
Kill yourself.
What'd you say?
That's true. Nobody should ever threaten anybody with that. Just don't do that. If you're that type of person, rethink your strategy. Just rethink it. It's not your place, nor your right to tell anybody else to kill themselves. That's pure ignorance to offer those kinds of threats to people. Never do it. And so when he's talking about that, with people sending those kind of threats to him, I have more compassion for him in that front, because it's a truly terrible thing to have somebody tell you that you're supposed to kill yourself. And yeah, I just have a lot. I have a lot of issues with people that ever use that threat, that commenting, anything like that. It's so unbelievably ignorant, all the way around. Just so unbelievably ignorant. Yeah.
I should?
You shouldn't. Don't even try and put that in my mouth.
I'm not. That's what I'm here for.
Not okay
I'm not here to talk about
anyone
how many
say
tickets
that.
I should have or how many people should have done this. I know I made mistakes. I'm sorry. There's only so much reparation I can pay. Lost my house over it, lost my car, lost my business, lost my friends, lost pretty much everything you can imagine, had to rebuild, had to restart, still being told to kill myself. I'm here to help some other little girl and to get healing from myself, not relive the past.
He's not there for that. We know that. He's here to be able to help build up his name, to be able to start his new company, which neither here nor there. But yes, I'm still going to stick by that. Nobody should ever tell him to kill himself. Nobody should ever tell anybody to kill themselves, ever, period. Just end of sentence, end of thought. What I will say here is that he's saying that he's here for healing for himself, and he's apologized He said, I'm sorry, which he hasn't said that he's sorry for anything that he's done so far. He's only apologized for what everybody else has experienced and what has happened. He's perfectly fine in this in his eyes. So he's not actually apologizing, but he has said the words, I am sorry, multiple times, but it's never been for himself. So that's an interesting facet of this, but let's just keep watching to see what else happens.
So it has nothing to do with the fact that you're trying to do another TanaCon?
Who's... Girl.
You're obviously very angry.
I am.
You're obviously very defensive.
I am.
You're very...
Interesting play of words that Dr. Phil did here. So he says, you're obviously very angry, and it pans to him, and he's gripping the arms of his chair, and he's visibly angry across all channels of his nonverbal communication. And he also acknowledges that with an I am. Well, Dr. Phil knew that he was angry, and then he builds off of that with a slightly undermining comment, which is, you seem to be pretty defensive, or you're obviously pretty defensive. And so he, Michael, is kind of stuck in the line of saying I am because of how Dr. Phil said the initial thing. Now Dr. Phil has sprung this new thing that's undermining, and he's stuck saying I am again. It doesn't have the force behind the words because he realizes, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said yes, I'm defensive, because he knows that that is seen as a bad position to be in. Nobody likes to see somebody who is fully defensive about something, especially in an area where they might need to be apologizing. So this was a good move by Dr. Phil with his interviewing style. Kudos to him on that front.
Aggressive. And I can tell you that's not helping your situation at all.
Okay.
Look, I think people are very forgiving.
Okay, with a pretty substantial lip compression in there, he's biting back negative feelings, negative words, negative emotions centered around that line, which, yes, obviously, Dr. Phil is more or less telling him that he's wrong, and from anything that we've experienced so far, we know that Michael doesn't like to admit that he's wrong. So Dr. Phil saying you're more or less wrong is going to have some negative emotional repercussions in Michael, and it's showing up non-verbally.
And I think that what I expected from you was to come in and say, I had really good intentions, but obviously I blew it. I didn't have foresight. I didn't see around corners. I didn't anticipate that the promotion for this was going to trigger people to come that weren't expected to come.
And all that's true.
We were overwhelmed, and the buck stops here. I'm the promoter. It's my job to anticipate, as a professional, what's going to happen and have the resources in place. And I blew it.
He had some sort of contention with what Dr. Phil was saying there. It's my job to anticipate what's going to happen. And at that moment, you could see him lightly narrow his eyes, but then also his eyebrows furrow pretty substantially downwards and inwards, which is an indicator of a few things. Regularly, it's an indicator of some sort of anger-based emotion, be that frustration, disgust, anger, rage, so on and so forth. But then it could also be related to confusion, which for many people, confusion and anger can walk hand in hand. Nobody likes to be confused, and in an area like this, it would make sense for him to be frustrated by the confusing statement. Regardless, he has contention with Dr. Phil saying that it was his responsibility to anticipate. We don't know what that is. I don't know if it's even addressed, but he does feel it there. Let's keep going.
And I was wrong, and I'm sorry for that.
Big postural change during that, sign of agitation or role change as I mentioned before, or he could be getting uncomfortable. Once again, it's centered around a pretty important portion, so it's likely not the comfort thing, but he has a massive postural change. I was wrong, blah, 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 and he's very upset by that. He's offended by that, and that's showing in his nonverbal communication. He is not comfortable saying that he did a bad thing. Let's keep watching.
It did not go down professionally, and that was my job, and that stops with me.
Yes,
and I have learned huge lessons from that.
Indeed.
And will be better in the future. And you've said none of that. You've said, I'm a victim, I'm being picked on, How am I supposed to know this? How am I supposed to know that? You're supposed to know that because you are a professional.
Here again, we see he's about to try to respond against an accusation from Dr. Phil. What Dr. Phil has said for what his apology should have been portion is exactly what Michael needed to say. If he had done that, taken responsibility, done the mature thing, people would have been like, you know what? You did really mess this up pretty bad. But yeah, you're 24 years old and let's not shut down your career at this point. He's not doing any of that. And Dr. Phil calls him out for that, and Michael was about to try to retort back to that. Fortunately, Dr. Phil knows what he's doing and continued speaking rather calmly and fluidly throughout that, despite seeing that Michael wanted to interrupt. I'm just kind of glad that Michael didn't interrupt on that part.
Professional.
And I did apologize, and I
No,
have.
you didn't apologize.
That really high-pitched tone that you hear, and I did apologize, that is a sign of nerves, sign of agitation. There's some sort of strain, psychological strain centered around that. Now we know it's because he didn't actually fully apologize, and his nonverbal communication is showing that. He knows that he hasn't fully apologized. Even on a subconscious level, he might not be consciously aware of it, but subconsciously he's at least somewhat aware of it, because otherwise that agitation wouldn't have cropped up so prevalently in that line. But it did. Long story short, he's not being sincere when he's saying, and I did apologize. Let's keep watching.
Gave an excuse cloaked as an apology with
Dr.
no
Phil, I just
genuine remorse whatsoever.
I am remorseful. I just apologized to her, and I apologized to you before I said that. But at the end of the...
He didn't. Michael, you never apologized for what you did. You exclusively apologized for how other people perceived or took on what you did. You did a dumb thing. You need to apologize for you doing the dumb thing. Maybe this will sink in for you.
Well, I don't think she feels apologized to. I think she feels attacked.
And vice versa.
Now, Michael gave us a list of people.
It's very clear that he's felt attacked from the beginning of this, probably all the way through to the end. But he does feel attacked, but there was no scamming from the fan side. It's just from his side. So she doesn't have to apologize. He has to apologize. She also hasn't said anything that's hateful towards him or mean. She's just criticized the things that he's done wrong, and all that he's displaying is defensiveness. That is an interesting character tick on Michael's belt, and it's not unheard of. People who are in positions of power oftentimes are unable or unwilling to hear criticism for it. It's really unfortunate all the way around, but we are seeing these emotional displays pop up. Let's continue watching.
To reach out to in support of him. Surprising, only a few responded. Now, one of those is currently a client of Michael's named Blake. And joining us from Reno, Nevada is Blake, who is a social media influencer with over 1 million followers. So Blake, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Dr. Phil. How are you?
Well, it's good. I'm glad to meet you.
Good to meet you too.
He's very uncomfortable with being on screen here. You can see by a few things the smallness in his frame. He's very hunched and taking up a very small real estate in the frame of the shot itself. Also, you can see by the general movements of his arms that he's fidgeting out of screen as well. Just all common signs of nerves and agitation. He's on national television. I would expect most of us would probably be pretty darn nervous during this point.
You know about all of this situation, and you know Michael. What's been your experience in dealing with him?
So I was actually at TanaCon as a fan. I purchased the $65 VIP pass. I didn't know Michael at the time. I just was a really big fan of Tana and still am. But after that, I met Michael through some mutual friends, and he has been my manager since May of 2019, and he's been amazing.
Right. So do you think he's suffering from unfair treatment?
I do, because even like if I post with him or something, like I get super negative comments on my stuff like about him.
There are things being said about him, go kill yourself, you're not.
So here's an interesting question. Dr. Phil asks, is he being treated unfairly? And he says, I do. Even when I post pictures about him, I get negative stuff, which wasn't the question. The question is he being treated unfairly? That's not really neither here nor there. It's just an interesting verbal pattern that he doesn't directly answer the question with an example that supports it. He answers the question, I do, and then gives a semi-related example to support it, which isn't really validating for his position, but it could still be kind of considered that. Regardless, let's keep watching.
Worth living. You're a liar, a cheat, a scammer. You can't be trusted, et cetera, et cetera. Has that been your experience in working with him?
No.
So how do you find him to work with?
Working with Michael, he is like always.
So I wanted to be able to hear some pitch and tonal changes here before I spoke on it, because what I noticed is when he responded no, it was a distinctly different pitch and tone quality than the rest of his speaking. His speaking sits about here-ish, but when he responded, he said no. And it's that very low tone, low pitch, and low volume that can indicate a few things, not the least of which is that he's possibly being deceptive, or at very least lacks security in what he's saying. So if he doesn't fully believe what he's saying, there's no reason for us to. Let's keep watching.
So professional and just like always so bougie but he is so professional, and he has just like overall just been an amazing friend for me.
Interesting preening gestures in there while talking about Michael. Preening gestures are when you're like, I'm aware of what I'm presenting myself as and I'm self-conscious about it. It's commonly done in areas where a person is attracted to another person. I'm not saying that's the case here. That is a common example for it, however. So it could be an indicator that perhaps he has some attraction to Michael. There's that possibility. I don't know. It is interesting that the preening gestures pop up right where he's supposed to be talking about how great Michael is.
Like, as my manager, I have been going through it for the last year or two, and like no matter what, he's just always been there for me, but like stayed strictly like professional, and he's my manager, and he helps me through so much, honestly.
A lot of repetition, professional, and he's my manager, and he was doing everything really well, and he's my manager. It's this odd verbal repetition. It's like he doesn't have enough content to say that Michael is a great person, so he has to regurgitate the content that he's already said once before to be able to really hammer that home. It's just interesting to me. I don't fully buy that testimony. There's some dynamic there that I'm not seeing, that I'm not catching. It's off, and I've given you my small reasons why. Regardless, I don't hold as much weight behind his words as the girl, for instance, who was at TanaCon and was pretty upset by it.
Sydney, describe what you experienced the moment you announced TanaCon was canceled.
In the moment that TanaCon was canceled.
Ooh. Okay, so this is the assistant of Michael, Sydney, and she was the one who unfortunately had to go and face the angry mob of people that Michael orchestrated and tell them that everything was going to be canceled. And then Michael tries to downplay her role by saying, no, it was really me who had to do that the second time when everybody already knew, but it was also the time when all the cameras were there so they could see me doing it. We're about to hear from the assistant as well. So she's worked very close quarters with Michael for a while, so her words should have a lot of weight. I'll be paying especially close attention to what she does nonverbally to hopefully see if there's any possible seepage of deception. We'll find out.
It was absolute terror. Looking back on it now, I feel like I almost blacked out in the situation because there was just so much going on. Going into the event, I'm a college student. I have no professional experience in running events. I came to this as a way to get my feet wet in the industry, and I trusted Michael to do so. And in that moment, everything just collapsed.
Yeah, that wasn't
Yeah, that's fairly true.
Fun thing to here. Take this megaphone and go out and tell all these pissed off people.
Yep, and it was like
down.
I had to weave through the crowd to get there, and standing on the table was like a rickety plastic table, and I was handed a microphone and had to make the best of it, and my hands were tied.
Yeah, and you were associated with Michael for how long?
About a year.
Uh-huh. And was that a positive experience or a negative experience?
Yeah, I think I'm one of the few people who got to see a side of Michael that after this event that not many people knew about. Leading up to it, I had a wonderful experience, great memories, great laughs, but things did start turning south as more success came.
How so?
It became more so not, cherishing the employees, protecting the creators. It became dollar signs. I mean, Michael had a very good start in the social media industry, and as the social media industry grew, Michael grew too, and I believe it became like a power trip almost. But in March, leading up to TanaCon, is when the red flags were really popping up.
Such as?
So far, from what I can see non-verbally, she hasn't shown any areas of possible desynchronization. The things that she's stating, they don't have emotional weight specifically behind them. It's not like, oh, this should be obviously angry, this should be happy. She's just kind of stating facts to her recollection of things. And she's showing genuine, authentic, and synchronized nonverbal communication during those times. AKA, I would be buying that, so to speak. I would take her word for that because she hasn't given me a reason not to. That's good news that so far, she hasn't tried to smokescreen us at all.
We were going on a business trip to a convention with all of our clients, and leading up to that event, we were told we were going to take care of our clients, to take care of their meet and greets. We had a whole panel with all of our clients, and when it was close to the event, we were told, me and another employee, we had to earn our way into the event, and we're like, what do you mean? Like, these are our clients, we were told we were going. Michael ended up buying us a ticket. We got there, and when we got there, we were told at that point that we had to earn a bed to sleep in. And it's like, now I'm from Minnesota and I'm in Florida now. I don't know anybody in Florida. And to be looked at and told, like, you have to earn a bed to sleep in, I don't even know what that means or what that looks like. And actually in that moment, Tana and her team were the ones who came to me and our coworker, and they rearranged all their sleeping arrangements, all their hotel arrangements, to make sure that me and my coworker had a bed.
So once again, she's still being synchronized, but on the note of Tana and her team kind of taking care of these people, that kudos to them. I don't have a supremely high opinion of Tana much of the time, but in that area, very big kudos to her. Thank you, Tana, for taking care of these people like their manager, or at least boss, should have. So thank you, Tana. I appreciate that. Michael, really?
Remember that night being like, I am an employee of this company and I can't even have a bed to sleep in when I'm here working. And not only that, I flew down.
What the hell was that all about?
I'll be honest with you, I don't actually recall this, but I can say that, I've been to hundreds of those conventions over the years, and I think that...
Nobody cares, Michael. Nobody cares how many conventions you went to. Nobody cares.
If something like that happened, I would have had a reason to do that, whether it was we had clients that needed a bed. Even myself, I would give a client my bed over me sleeping in a bed. It just depends on... I don't recall that situation. I wish I could think on it. I just don't.
I don't think he wishes he could recall it. I think he probably distinctly remembers it. There wasn't any nonverbal reason for that. Just so you know, that's just my opinion. There wasn't anything for me to be able to look at and be like, oh, obviously he's lying at this part. All right, actually, and as it turns out, this is the end of part 1 on Dr. Phil's channel, so I will end mine here as well. That's actually kind of convenient because, like I said, Michael's MO on this was to be defensive and not take responsibility, and that entire time he held up wonderfully to that. Let's talk about the science. Nonverbally speaking, he showed multiple points of desynchronization. He showed some nonverbal leakage in regards to deception with some desynchronization of his head movements to words. He showed a lot of defensive posturing and expressions and gestures all the way around during this entire time, regardless of who he's speaking to. If it's to Dr. Phil, if it's to the fan, if it's to his assistant, if it's to anybody, he's only defensive. He went on to manipulate people, and then he also tried to avoid any possibility of taking responsibility. Even his apologies were false, so on and so forth. Now, from my side, my opinion side of things, I don't appreciate what he did here. I don't appreciate the mindset behind it. It seems as though he's been really happy to divert attention from himself, divert responsibility from himself, and put it on anybody else that he can possibly find because he feels that he's the most important thing and he's blessing the world with his presence. I do not support people sending him death threats or telling him to kill himself or hurt himself in any way. Never okay, and I will never stand for that on any level, regardless of who the person is that's receiving them. Just don't It's not your place. Everything else in regards to his career and how he's treated other people, it seems to be fairly karma-based. He seems to be a pretty terrible person and he's receiving some pretty terrible treatment back. So he should have taken full responsibility for all of his actions, both professionally and personally, apologized for them, and then just simply said that he wanted to do better and he was going to work to do better. But he didn't. Let me know in the comments below, though, if you agree or disagree with what I've seen here. If you would like me to be able to read anything else, let me know in the comments below. Everything's in the comments below if you want to reach out to me. What a shock. If you did like this video, go ahead and consider hitting the like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell because that helps you know, especially for things like impromptu and unannounced live streams that I'll occasionally do on the channel before they fizzle off onto Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, if you follow those links in the description below, literally any of them, they all help the channel. Patreon will have some more patron exclusive content on there, mini lessons, exclusive episodes, so on and so forth, including the live streams. But the big thing that I'm excited for is the EIA, the Emotional Intelligence Academy partnership that I've worked for years to be able to build, to bring to you, so that if you would like to be able to start down the path of being a nonverbal analyst or working in a similar field, you can do so at a little bit of a discount. If you go to eiagroup.com and sign up for any of their courses, then at checkout you use the code OBSERVE, you get 10% off. And I think that's pretty cool. That's where I'm getting my master's through as well. So I highly suggest it. They're extremely knowledgeable. So if you would like to be able to do something similar to me, that's the way to go about it. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan and you have been oh so awesome as you always are. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Are my audios still good? Oh, they are. Oh, I hope this works.